the fact that somebody is poor, somebody is rich, does not constrain how free they are. But when you regulate, you're violating everybody's freedom. That is, you're violating the freedom of the producer and of the rich and of the poor. Once you start regulating, it's a road to serfdom.
Look, I think this is delusional, okay?
Regulations that protect the worst off from systemic exploitation by basically an extractor class serve freedom overall, even though they constrain the extractor class. And I don't understand, Yaron, why you wouldn't join me in that program.
If different material conditions or whatever mean that some individuals are unable to exercise their freedom because of the greater power, intrinsic power of others, how do you, given that you essentially believe that regulation is a step to tyranny, how do you compensate for that
So I don't believe we have disparate freedoms based on how much wealth we have or how much income we have.
You've
or what
different
our
capacity to realize those freedoms.
No, it's not an issue of capacity to realize. Freedom is the absence of coercion of force. You can be poor and not be coerced. You can be rich and not be coerced. You can be poor and coerced and rich and coerced. So the question is coercion.
But if you're poor and try to have a drink, they take you into jail with guns. And if you're rich, they don't.
Drink, if you violate somebody else's freedom to produce the drink by taking it away from them, then you go to jail because you're violating somebody else's freedom. So yes, freedom is the standard. The rights, the issue of freedom is the standard. And if I try to violate somebody else's freedom of production and ownership, then yes, I go to jail. But the fact that somebody is poor, somebody is rich, does not constrain how free they are. But when you regulate, you're violating everybody's freedom. That is, you're violating the freedom of the producer and of the rich and of the poor. Everybody suffers as we regulate more. If the regulation is non-voluntary, if the regulation is through government mechanisms of coercion, then everybody throughout suffers, and it's a slippery slope. That is, and I believe in slippery slopes. Once you start regulating, it's a road to serfdom, as Hayek would say. He wouldn't agree on the specific regulations, but it is a road to serfdom that takes time, but it does lead us towards tyranny.
I think this is delusional, okay?
Well, that's direct.
I'm here to present a delusional point of view. I'm the token delusional at the conference.
Basically, what Yaron is saying is it doesn't matter whether the real options available to you are infinitesimal or super gigantic. And what I'm saying is, no, that is really what matters, okay? And you know, if you want to look at the freest societies that are, you know, advanced economies in the world, I say, look at Scandinavia, okay? Lots of regulation, but in fact, probably everybody has very meaningful, important options, okay? And nobody's under the thumb, arbitrary will of anybody else. I can't say that about my own country, the United States. We have a lot of private tyranny going on in the United States, especially in the employment sector. So, you know, and the formal equality under the law, which Yaron is talking about, does not give everybody an equally good option set.
So I agree. I don't think equality of options, of opportunities is a standard. Is something we should strive for. I think maximizing opportunity is something we should strive for, and I would argue that freedom maximizes opportunity. And using Scandinavia, you know, in pretty much every economic freedom index, Denmark and Sweden rank higher than the United States. So on economic freedom, it is not clear at all that the United States is freer than Denmark and Sweden. We've made different choices about what to regulate and what to redistribute, but they are not that different. Again, on both economic freedom indexes that are published in the world today, Denmark ranks higher than the United States in economic freedom. So, you know, we're talking about mixed economies. We're not talking about any economy that's absolutely free by my standards. And we're talking about the fact that, yes, in Denmark, there's certain options that are more available. In the United States, there are other options. And if we ever lowered immigration, I'm a big pro-immigration, open borders guy. If we ever had open borders between Sweden and the United States, what do you think the direction of flow would be? Now, I have no doubts that more Swedes would come to America than America to Sweden, because many more, many more, and today there are many more Europeans coming to the United States than Americans coming to Europe. Many more.
Wait 6
Give
weeks.
it time.
Now, true, Donald Trump could switch that. One of the reasons, just
Look,
one
wait,
sentence.
no, just hold
One of the
on.
reasons I don't
Look,
like to be on the
wait a
right,
second.
just like define. One of the reasons I don't like to be called on the right is that me and Donald Trump do not share anything in common.
understand.
And if he's on the right, I am not there.
Okay.
So,
done.
so I think the observation that you just made about Scandinavia is a helpful one, because it poses the following thought experiment, which is a real experiment. So Denmark less so, but Finland and Sweden actually are extremely entrepreneurial societies. Finland makes almost as many millionaires and billionaires per capita as the United States does, significantly more than Britain. Finland, I think, has the second highest number of billionaires per capita of any society. Here are two things that Finland does not have. It does not have a large ground down mass of seriously poor people. And it also does not have a second set, which is the group of non-entrepreneurial, very, very affluent people. So the group of people who in Britain are the people who work at Magic Circle law firms, or work in the city in banks, or in the United States, the people who work in finance, or top non-entrepreneurial managerial executives. And the reason why Finland and Sweden don't have those classes is that they deploy their regulation in a way that ensures that workers in particular, and people who wish to work also, have a meaningful set of options. And what that does is it suppresses the ability of this other class to extract from them. It turns out they can do that without suppressing the ability of entrepreneurs to get fabulously rich, right? So one kind of question asked, I think Liz and I probably both are quite comfortable with that. I'm not somebody who thinks that every billionaire is a policy failure. Some billionaires are policy failures.
A lot of them, actually.
But not necessarily, right? And that's because I recognize that there's a certain kind of enterprise and entrepreneurship that is appropriate toward and respect, right? But I do think that regulations that protect the worst off from systemic exploitation by basically an extractor class serve freedom overall, even though they constrain the extractor class. And I don't understand, Yaron, why you wouldn't join me in that.
Okay, before
program.
you answer, Aaron, that actually brings me to my third question. That without wishing to distort what you're saying, I think it would be safe to say that you don't regard freedom as a kind of universal good in all circumstances. But if that's not the case, if we abandon that thought, what values should we be promoting instead, or in addition, perhaps?
This for me?
It is for you.
Yeah, so look, I think that's a really hard question for the following reason. I think there's a different answer in morals and in politics. In morals, my private moral view is one of quite a lot of constraint, that most of our desires are not terribly worthy, and that we should aspire to do the things that are most valuable, and that when we deliberate, we'll discover that lots of the things that are most valuable are difficult and are not the things that we immediately are drawn to when we give in to our tastes and urges. And so it's quite restrictive. There's not a lot of a certain kind of freedom, or at least easygoing choice. But I also think that all of you, even if you agree with this in the abstract, will have a different list of things that you think are actually worthwhile. And so in our politics, there's a reason to preserve the freedom to make a series of choices that each of us in our own morals think make the chooser much worse off. And how to balance those two forces against each other is a very tricky question.
Liz, do you have a vision of how you would do that?
Well, so, I mean, I'm pretty much with Dan here. Look, we all have different conceptions of the good, and we all want to, pursue that. And that's going to require a set of fundamental rights that give us, those liberties. So I'm not looking for a vision of society that's sort of outside or denies freedom. I'm very much in favor of freedom, but I want people to have significant freedoms And in order for everyone to enjoy significant freedoms, including freedom from domination and exploitation of various sorts, you're going to need substantial regulation. Quite importantly, antitrust regulation, which is why America has a class of non-entrepreneurial, super rich people, and Scandinavia doesn't. Europe in general is much stronger on the antitrust front than the United States.
Europe's often characterized in the United States as a place of, freedom suppression, but we've just heard that actually it creates, by regulation, a greater set of freedoms.
Yeah, it's quite stunning. Given the last 15 years of economic growth that anybody would defend the European model right now, Europe has fallen dramatically behind the United States for a variety of reasons. Even the European Union is now saying, we regulate too much, there's not enough entrepreneurship, there are real problems here.
There's more entrepreneurship in Europe than the United States.
That is simply untrue.
If you look at rates of self-employment.
By any standard, that is simply untrue. And certainly there's a lot less wealth creation in Europe, dramatically less wealth creation in Europe than there is in the United States. And I will look at the data at Finland because Dan said so. So I will examine that.
Sweden, they're all more self-employed than the United States.
Norway cheats because it's a little oil fiefdom. But
well, the United States cheats because of the exorbitant privilege of the global dominance of the U.S. dollar,
which exists because the United States has been the dominant economy in the world since World War II, and because of its achievements and because of the wealth creation, and because, in spite of all my criticism of the Federal Reserve, it has been a more responsible central bank than most others. So it's not random and it's not by use of force that the dollar is dominated in the world. It's because of economics. It's because it makes sense for all these countries to use the dollar. If they could switch, they would have switched.
It doesn't.
And they're trying to.
This is a second order question. I'm surprised at that answer from you, Yaron, because I get a certain kind of extreme, unrelenting, uncompromising libertarianism. Yeah. I think it makes a series of conceptual and moral mistakes, but I understand the view. But the thought that the United States is the global exemplar of that view,
I don't consider that.
Or even better than other places with respect. It seems like it seems a category error.
I think there's relatively more freedom in the United States than Europe, as a consequence. There's relatively more wealth creation in the United States than in the rest of the world, and I think there are more choices and there are more options and there are more opportunities in the United States than the rest of the world. Not because the United States is a model. It is not. It is a disaster by my standards. It could be a lot better. But the direction in which to make it better is the direction of more freedom, less regulations, less controls, smaller government, more liberty for the individual in every regard. It's nice that the Constitution protects our freedom of speech. It would be nice if they protected our other freedoms as well. So I'm not defending the United States as a model, but I find this elevation of Europe as some kind of this amazing standard that we should all strive towards, and the United States should become like Europe, as both scary and wrong. It's just misinformation. It's just inaccurate to describe it that way, and to couch the United States as a dollar, for example, as having being the world currency only because the United States imposes it is just factually nonsense. There are actual economic reasons for why the dollar is dominant. So my perspective is, look, freedom should be absolute.
You're ignoring the history of United States. The post-war era had global dominance over all the international institutions.
But there's a reason for that. But there's a reason for that.
Because they had untrammeled
power after
World War II.
There was a war in which you Europeans decided to kill each other, and if not for the United States, you'd still be doing it. So there's actual historical reason and consequence for that behavior that after
All
World
I'm
War II,
saying is
right?
the post-war era had nothing to do with the United States just in a pure free market here. The United States
there's never been a
rigged
free market
the
in the
global
United States.
monetary system to its own advantage.
Could I just ask Aaron again? Forgive me if I've misunderstood something, but if you equate economic success with freedom, a necessary condition, how do you explain China?
Oh, easily. No, I mean, I've spoken of this a lot. China provided certain level of freedom, economic freedom, to its population in particular regions, in particular times, where they allowed them economic freedom and what I call pseudo-property rights, because these are property rights could be taken away by the state in an instant, but pseudo-property rights, they succeeded. So Deng Xiaoping went down to Guangzhou, the province next to Hong Kong, and he said, everybody's escaping here and going to Hong Kong. Instead of trying to build walls and prevent them from escaping, what if we mimic Hong Kong? What if we in this area allow for foreign investment? What if in this area we allow for entrepreneurs to make choices for themselves without state regulation? What if we
but it wasn't without state regulation.
It was without state regulation.
No,
what if we just leave this alone? And what happened when he left it alone is you come back a few years later and the place is incredibly successful. She said, okay, so let's try this in Shanghai and let's try this here. And there's still regions in China where this experiment has not yet been tried and they are dirt poor. That's where poverty pervades. And he did this on a micro level too. There was a little village where they were starving and everything was communally owned. This is communal farming. This is 1978. And the village got together and they said, let's create pseudo property rights. Let's your family do this, your family do that part of land. And they divided all the parts of land, but in secret because they didn't want the Communist Party to find out. And the next year they produced 3 times the amount of food they had before. Communist Party came down and said, what happened? How did you do this? They discovered the scheme. The instinct of the communists was to basically wipe out the village. Deng Xiaoping said, and he's not a good guy, by the way, even though in these things he's good. He came to the village and said, wait a minute, this was successful. Let's try this in other villages. In other words, creating freedom through property rights, which is a form of creating freedom. And that is how China went through a revolution in both industry and agriculture, so that today it feeds more to itself, it can export food. Freedom works everywhere it's tried, and economic freedom works phenomenally well when it's tried, and when you go against it,
I think
you
are
create poverty.
Exaggerating the extent of freedom that was actually achieved economically in China. There's massive amounts of state subsidy in particular industries and sectors. There's massive amounts of state-owned enterprise. A lot even of the so-called free enterprise are actually run by heads of the Chinese military. There are deep interconnections between state actors and entrepreneurs. In many ways, they're still under the thumb of the Communist Party. They have achieved great economic success, but you cannot tell this story as a story of free markets, okay? It's not unregulated freedom by any means.
It clearly is. The state-run enterprises are the ones that have held the economic progress
but a lot
back.
of the other enterprises are actually owned by Communist Party officials and officials of the Chinese Communist Army.
So
they're deeply interconnected here.
Okay.
Look,
nobody's arguing.
okay.
Nobody's arguing that China is a free country.
Right.
I'm arguing that to the extent that they succeeded, it's because they allowed for economic freedom in the areas and to the extent.
Is due to massive state subsidies.
The massive state subsidies held it back.
Industries.
It held it back.
To the contrary, every
Ladies and
successful
gentlemen,
sector is strongly state
having reached
supported.
this point of harmony and agreement.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below.
With a free trial, you can enjoy the full talk and thousands more.
Thank you for being part of the conversation.